Hello, today I'm going to be talking about materials I recommend you buy if you or someone you know is a beginning artist. My list is based upon the 20 years of experience I've had and the training I've received over those years. If you're worried about buying some of these materials for an artist as a gift idea, don't be. A lot of times artists use up the materials they have, so redundancy is always a good thing. My recommendations I've divided into 3 different lists. One is for drawing materials, one is for painting materials, and another is for other media. If you would like to skip ahead to certain lists, I have them time-stamped below, as well as an Amazon idea list so that it can be easier for you to find the materials I'll be talking about today. Now I'm going to give a quick discussion as to why I divided these materials into 3 different lists. To me, painting before you can draw is putting the cart before the horse. You need to build up your abilities to do perspective, to do shading, and to understand composition before you should start trying to put paint on the canvas. In my opinion, doing it the other way around can be enormously frustrating for somebody who's trying to develop as an artist and not just do a one-off at, say, a paint and party place. I suggest getting the drawing materials first, developing that skill set, and then if you still have an interest in being an artist and you want to go further, buying the painting supplies. After buying the painting supplies and getting some experience, I then recommend branching out into even more variable media. The first list is the list of drawing materials. Drawing materials are very important because as a beginning artist, you need to build up your hand-eye coordination with what you see and how to get it onto the page. Lucky for most people, drawing materials are relatively inexpensive. With these drawing materials, you can get a good pencil set for around $7 to $3.81 on Amazon. Of course, your drawing materials don't matter unless you have a sketchbook. A 120-page sketchbook can go for about $5, and that's with it being an 8.5 by 11 inch. I recommend getting an 8.5 by 11 inch. A lot of people think that smaller sketchbooks will be easier to draw in, just as they think smaller canvases will be easier to paint on. In fact, it can be a lot more difficult when you're learning to try to do something small because every little stroke, every little dot can affect your overall image. And when you're still just developing that hand-eye coordination, it can be incredibly frustrating. Another material I recommend is called a T-square. It looks just like a ruler, except it's got this other piece of plastic on the side of it. What that's going to do is it's going to allow you to put it up against the edge of a paper and draw a grid more easily. Grids are really important when you're first learning how to draw, but especially if you're working from an image for reference. It's called the grid method. Another important material to have when you're learning how to draw is a book that helps guide you along the way. A book that I think is very helpful and that I've given to others and had others learn from is the book called How to Draw Cool Stuff by Catherine Holmes. In that book, it discusses the different types of pencils, how to do perspective, but it does it in a very quick, easy to understand way. It's not going to overwhelm you, and it's going to be to the point, and it will help you understand your materials. I hesitate sometimes to recommend the books. Sometimes when an artist is new, they want to do more than they want to read about how to do. But if they take the time to learn from this book, it will really help advance them. This list of materials totals to be about $30. If I were going to add anything else to this list, it would be a set of micron pens. They have different tips on them so that you can experiment with different styles. Some people ask me why use archival ink, and the quick answer for that is that it's going to last. If you've ever drawn anything with a Sharpie, you'll realize in about 3 or 4 years that black Sharpie starts to look brown. That's because it's not archival ink. For artistic paper, people wonder what is the difference between the copy paper in a machine and that sketch pad. And that would be the acid. The acid is what's going to cause the discoloration over time. Some of that is inevitable, but to have the longevity of your work, you want to have acid-free and you want to have archival ink. As a new artist, unfortunately, a lot of the work that you make in the beginning, you're going to throw away. So some people say there's no point in making that extra expense. I say you never know what pieces you're going to be proud of, and you never know what pieces you're going to end up keeping. There are some paintings I did when I was 17 that are still really good today, and I'm glad I used good materials when I made them. Now we're going to discuss the painting list. For the painting list, I'm going to go down through all the items I recommend and why. The overall cost for the items that I recommend for the beginner will cost around $90, as compared to the $30 for the drawing list items. Again, this is why it's always good to start off with the drawing items. For one, to build that skill set, and for two, it's a much more affordable place to start to learn how you feel about art and whether or not you want to continue. When it comes to learning how to paint as an artist, you'll see a lot of large sets that include watercolor, oil, and acrylic. For beginning artists, I always recommend acrylic paints. One of the major reasons is that acrylics are water soluble. Also, you can technically water them down and use them as watercolors, which is a good way to save money in the beginning. When buying tubes of paint online that are acrylic, I recommend being careful about the quantity that is in the tubes. A lot of the advertisements will tell you how many colors you're getting, and they'll say how many milliliters of paint that is. If you're not used to painting, you won't realize exactly how much paint it is that you are not buying. This is a tube. It is exactly 5 fluid ounces, or 148 milliliters. This tube of paint is around $17 to $20. This is a lot of paint. Even for me, this lasts me quite a while. This is a 2 fluid ounce tube of paint. Now you'll notice that in the one that I have listed in my Amazon idea list, they're 18 milliliters, which is closer to this. This is 22 milliliters. So that's how much paint you're getting. It's a 36 tube set with 18 milliliter paint. A lot of the sets will also list your 12 milliliters, and that's this much paint, if that gives you any idea. So keep that in mind when you see sets of acrylic paints that are listed at really great prices. Also, sometimes it isn't helpful to have 123 different colors in a set when you're beginning. One of the most important skills that you can begin to develop is what colors look like when you begin to mix them yourselves to get the color you want. While it may seem like getting yourself or someone else a huge assortment of colors would be a great idea for a gift or for yourself, it can actually be overwhelming, and you can end up not even using a lot of those paints. But also, it tends to be that when you get a lot of colors, they're in about sizes like this. Let's say you've already selected your tube set. Let's say you're going with the one that I recommend on the Amazon idea list, the 36 tubes that are 18 milliliters. That's a fair amount of paint. What I'll also add to that list is a 2 fluid ounce of white paint. There are 2 colors that artists tend to go through the fastest. That's white and black. Normally I would recommend getting a white tube and a black tube, but I can't bring myself to recommend the black. Artists will overuse black, and it can be a very flat color, but also there's a nuance to blacks and grays that a new artist may not get. The best way I can describe it is that sometimes when companies are making the color black, it may be more blue or it may be more brown. We consider those to be your cool grays and your warm grays, so that when you start to add white to that black, your gray will have a brownish or a bluish hint. And that bluish can look really weird as a skin tone, and that brownish can look really weird for a night color. It can make your evenings look dingy if you're trying to go for a nice crisp blue evening. I tend to find that the use of black in a new artist tends to be overkill, and it tends to do more harm than good. But again, as a new artist, a lot of people like doing it. I just can't recommend it. The other material that I recommend is an easel. The easel that I recommend, if you notice, has a totally smooth surface, instead of being like one that you may have seen in the movies that's standing up. This is called a table easel. I recommend it because most people are comfortable sitting down when they paint, and also because of its smooth surface, it can double as a drawing table. So to me, that's 2 birds with 1 stone. These tables are going to run you around $30, and it's one that I still use today. Sometimes the standing easel can be very difficult for new artists, but they are traditional and they're still very effective. Now I'm going to be discussing what sort of brushes you should buy. If you're a beginner or you're getting it for someone who is a beginner, I don't recommend spending a lot of money. It isn't that they aren't worth the money, but that for me, a brush is a very personal item. It was only through experience and time that I began to learn what kind of brush size and what kind of brushes I liked. Brushes can be very expensive. If you walk down the aisle, you'll see a single brush sometimes for $65. That's not a good place to start if you're just beginning. A better place to start, a variety pack of 30 for $6. Leave it to the beginner to decide what they do and don't like, and they'll go out and eventually start buying the supplies that they want. If you're giving this as a gift for somebody and you're worried that these brushes are too cheap and they won't use them, don't worry. There's a lot of different projects that artists will get into where they're going to need a cheap brush, one that they're not worried about ruining. Later on in someone's artistic career, they're going to start spending more on brushes, but they're also going to know what sort of brushes they want to spend money on. Some people will ask me why certain brushes cost more than others, and the best way I can describe it, which women will probably follow more easily than men, is that you can feel the difference between a good makeup brush and a bad makeup brush. The same thing goes with the brushes used for painting. To me, the worst quality a brush can have is that it sheds. Shedding is inevitable, but to me, cheaper brushes, the bristles are not glued as well, and when you go to do a stroke, all of a sudden you'll see little hairs in your paint, and then you're trying to pick out the hairs and it ruins your painting. With a cheaper brush set, it's more likely that that's going to happen, but it's also less likely that you're going to be hanging on to your first paintings for the rest of your life. Most of the time, you'll grow, you'll progress, and you'll become more and more proud, and you'll be displaying your better works first and forefront. For me, I'm still nostalgic about my older works, but I'm not hanging them up anymore. Now that we've discussed paint and we've discussed paint brushes, now we need to talk about what we're going to be painting on, canvas. When you go to an art supply store, you're going to notice there are a lot of different options, and it's going to be difficult to decide which one is right for you or which one's right for the artist that you'd like to give a gift to. I'm going to go through different types of canvas and explain what I believe the pros and cons are and why I recommend what I recommend. And a lot of these large art sets, they're going to include canvas boards and canvas, but largely canvas boards. And it's going to seem like a great deal because there will be a lot of the canvas boards to use. My issue with canvas boards is that over time, they're going to warp. They're going to respond to the humidity because it's cardboard with canvas stretched over it. One of the other issues that I have with canvas board is that it is not like canvas. It doesn't feel like canvas. It's a board. So when an artist switches from the board to an actual canvas, this is much more like a trampoline, a very taut trampoline. So sometimes there can be a little bit of a learning curve. Also, when you're a beginning artist and you finish something you're proud of, the first thing you want to do is hang it up. With a canvas board, there's no real way to hang this up. You have to put it in a frame that's going to run you around $15. While the board itself was maybe $1 to $2, you then have to factor in the cost of the frame to hang it up. Whereas you could have just gotten the canvas around $3 to $4 for a price difference when you're buying the packets, and then been able to immediately hang it because there's the slip on the inside. When you become more professional, you'll use a hanging wire for it, but in the beginning, that's not really necessary. You can just hang it as is, and it'll, for the most part, stay where you put it. Beyond canvas and canvas board, there's also something called a canvas pad. This is one that I have. It's 10 sheets. It's 16 by 20. A canvas pad is essentially the exact same canvas that you would find stretched on these stretcher boards, but just the cloth itself. It's a little bit thicker, a little bit more durable, and it also seems initially to be a more inexpensive way to paint. I don't recommend canvas pad for a beginning artist, and I'll explain why. First, the canvas pad does not have those stretcher bars to steady it, so when they peel it up and use it, they're going to have to put it down on something. This would be probably that easel that I recommended that's a nice flat surface. But if they had a French easel or a standing easel, the standing easel wouldn't be able to hold it up. You'd have to use a clipboard, you would have to use a drawing pad or something. Well, now you have a piece of paper that you're painting on, and the pressure of the brush and everything will zag. You know, it will tug that piece of canvas pad away from you. So now you're having to tape down the canvas pad to it, and it's all becoming a much more frustrating process. Also, you end up not saving a whole lot of money. Like the canvas board, once you finished it, how are you going to display it? It's just like a piece of paper, but being canvas, it's just like a piece of cotton. So what do? You buy a frame to hang it up. So you're back at the place where that single piece to present now runs you around 15 to 20 bucks, as opposed to just getting a canvas that's wrapped with no side staples and paying that initial cost. All that being said, learning on canvas board is totally fine. A lot of people do it. They just don't always realize that those boards are going to warp, and then once they finish their piece, all of a sudden they realize they have no idea how they're going to hang it up. And then that can be a little disappointing, especially if you're really proud of what you've done. The final material on my painting list is going to be the palettes. Now, palettes aren't necessary, but they're pretty inexpensive. You can get a 4-pack for about $5. You could probably not get them at all. You can use those little plastic lids from deli containers, old styrofoam tops. Most people end up throwing away their palettes, so it's not really necessary to buy something big and fancy. Also, very few people in the beginning are holding their palettes as you see in television, where somebody's standing at their French easel and they're doing this. Most of the time they're sitting down, they're so focused on what they're learning, they have their palettes sitting there. So you don't need to get one that has the fancy thumb hole. It would be very surprising to me to see someone use that. The only thing great about a professional artist palette is if you're diligent, you could wipe it off and reuse it. I will tell you that a lot of artists aren't diligent, and I've seen a lot of palettes just get caked with paint. I personally use a 1 foot by 2 foot board, and I switch out my board every year and I keep them. All the items that I've listed, they tally up to be around $89. If you get rid of the palettes, then it's around $84. The only other items that I would add to this list are a drop cloth, and I would add an artist rags. It can be easy to forget that art is messy, and so a nice piece of plastic to lay down to protect your stuff is a good idea. Obviously, you don't need to get fancy rags just for cleaning your paintbrushes, but if you don't know if they have them, they're always a welcome thing. I'll use old t-shirts, I'll use anything. Just depends on what's available, but it's a nice little gift to give somebody who's beginning. Before I go into my third list of other materials, other media to get a beginning artist, I want to take my drawing materials and my painting materials list and compare them to an all-in-one set on Amazon that I think is one that I would recommend buying. So you could either buy the materials and my ideas for the beginning artist list, or get this one item. Both are listed in my Amazon ideas list. The first thing that I want to say about the difference, the pro and con between my list and the Amazon list, is that with my list, you're having to hunt and find and peck and figure out, which ones you're going to buy. And with the Amazon one, it can, especially if you're giving it as a gift, all you have to do is that one click and there it is, it's all done. One of the pros behind the set is that there's both watercolor, acrylic, and oil paints in it. The downside is that to clean your oils, you need turpentine, and it's not coming with turpentine. That's a hidden cost. So at nearly $90, you'll also need to go out and get turpentine for your artist or yourself to clean with. The other downside is that the set that I recommend has 18 milliliter tubes, which are approximately this size. If you remember, this one's actually 22, so imagine slightly smaller. The one in the Amazon all-in-one list has 12 milliliter tubes. So that's about the difference. It's a 33% size difference. Now with this, you'll be able to do a lot more painting. So for me, it makes more sense for someone to have one type of media and more of it to continue to learn with, instead of trying to figure out watercolor, trying to figure out acrylic, trying to figure out oil. Oh, got to go out and buy the turpentine. That's one of the things about those sets that I don't quite like, is that I feel that it's throwing a lot at somebody who's just beginning to learn. And to me, it was a lot easier to learn one thing, feel pretty good at it, and then pick up another. One of the other issues with the set is, again, its use of canvas board. Now, if you've never had to buy anything for somebody, when you initially look at the set, it all looks at canvas. You actually have to look at the list there, understand that that's what's going on, but also what that will mean. To me, again, I've never really liked painting on canvas board. I think that your end product ends up getting damaged, and then I think as a new artist, you want to be able to hang it up. The next comparison that I want to make between the Amazon all-in-one set and my list is the pencils that are included. For the all-in-one set, there's only 2 pencils included, one of which is an HB. And if you don't know, an HB pencil is equivalent to any kind of pencil you have laying around your house. H stands for hardness, B stands for blackness. One that is considered HB is what people are used to when they think of pencils. With this, it seems as though the set is just including a pencil that you likely already have hanging around the house. Also with the set, there's only one type of eraser and not the kneaded eraser. I very much enjoy the kneaded eraser. I like it because when you use it, it doesn't shed. Also, you can knead it and that cleans the eraser. And you can also shape it like Play-Doh to erase exactly the little parts that you want to. I really enjoy my kneaded eraser. Also missing from this set is a ruler. So there's no way for someone to do a grid. The T-square is especially helpful because it will help keep your ruler from wiggling and your grid looking funky. One of the other parts that's missing from this is the smudge stick, which is really good for shading. Another part missing from this list is the charcoal, the Conte, and the charcoal pencils. For this all-in-one set, there appears to be 3 different sketchbooks included, one for oil, one for acrylic, and one for watercolor. This is somewhat disingenuous because if you actually look at the sketchbooks, there's only 10 pages in each, which isn't a lot of material. Again though, if someone's in the beginning stages, that's still 30 pieces that they're creating, so it is still a good range and it is still a good amount of material. But compared to the $5 sketchbook that I have on my list that has 120 pages, a beginning artist can do a lot more to develop, to create, and to explore when they have more pages to work with. Another pro and con of the all-in-one set are the palette knives. I list these as both pro and con because on one hand, palette knives are a lot of fun to have and they're a great tool to use. The con is that I wouldn't recommend these for somebody who was just starting to paint. Some people find them uncomfortable to use because you don't have as much control. So on one hand, I want to not recommend them because I've seen people get frustrated with them. On the other hand, I've also seen people really enjoy them. My final point of comparison is a draw. For this all-in-one set, 2 easels are included. The familiar French standing easel, but then also the table easel. Their table easel, though, does not have the smooth surface like the one I recommend in my list, so it does not double as a drawing table. But it does have a drawer for storage, so you have more of a place to put your paints and the things that you're using. So that's really nice. Also, the traditional artist in me does still like the standing easel. It's just been my experience with beginners that they don't like it and they tend to gravitate towards sitting down at the kitchen table or working at their desk. So I like to go with what seems to be familiar with them and what they're actually going to use. Now that I've covered my drawing list of supplies and my painting list of supplies and I've compared it to an all-in-one set that you could get on Amazon, I'd like to move on to my third list of items that you can buy for a beginner, and that is other media. What I mean by that is these are fun things that a beginner can try to see how they feel about it. One of these items is a set of things to sculpt with. For this, I selected a sculpture set that has a lot of different tools and a lot of different colors of clay. The clay I selected was because it's an oven-baked to harden clay, and especially when someone's learning how to play with clay, the dry time for more traditional clay can be something that is a lot more difficult for someone who's new. Also, sometimes people just really enjoy the colors. The set also has some jewelry fixtures to it, so you could turn some of your creations into earrings, which is always fun, a great Christmas gift, and a way to kind of put your toe into the waters of do you enjoy making jewelry? And the other item that I would recommend is a drawing tablet. You can get a simple one that's 4 inches by 6 inches for about $40. With these drawing tablets, there's a lot of different options for software that can range from $200 to free. For someone who's a beginner, I recommend free. There are 2 free softwares that are great for the beginner, but also the professional. The one that's the most well known is GIMP, and this is going to allow them to, for free, edit images. They might find that what they really enjoy doing is taking pictures on their phone and editing them in software. The other one I recommend, which is more for illustrating digitally, is called Inkscape, Draw Freely. This one is also free. I highly recommend using free softwares because using digital art can be very frustrating or very rewarding for some people. $40 is a good price point to figure out whether or not you like something. And also, if they do like it, they're going to have an idea of what sort of tablet they want to buy in the future. And so you've just given them a good way to take a step forward, dip that toe into the digital art realm, and enjoy themselves. One of the great things about digital art is when you're traveling or wherever you're going, none of your stuff takes up space. You can get it easily printed onto other items and share it however you like. So those are my recommendations and why I recommend them to an artist who's beginning, whether that is you or someone you know. Again, most of these materials that if you were to get them and they already had them, they're probably going to still use them. They're going to use up pencils, they're going to use up canvases. An extra easel is not that big of a deal. And you know what? Sometimes they're not going to use the things that you give them right away. There were some materials that I got that sat on a shelf for about a year or two, and then one day I came to use them. I hope this list is helpful and that it's answered some of the questions you might have had about what to buy and why.